The Khalij Fars is Iran's answer to a question that the IRGCN has been asking since 1988. How do you threaten an American aircraft carrier in the Persian Gulf with the equipment you can actually afford to build? The answer, arrived at after years of development with Chinese technical guidance and Iranian engineering improvisation, is a ballistic missile with a maneuvering re-entry vehicle designed specifically to defeat the kind of defensive architecture that protects American naval vessels. The Khalij Fars, Persian Gulf in English, is a single-stage solid-fuel ballistic missile with a range of approximately 300 kilometers and a terminal phase guidance system that allows the re-entry vehicle to maneuver toward its target after the ballistic arc is complete. The maneuvering capability is the point. A ballistic missile on a fixed trajectory can be intercepted by a system that models the trajectory and places an interceptor in the predicted path. A maneuvering re-entry vehicle complicates that geometry. Not impossibly. Not enough to defeat a fully configured Aegis BMD suite operating in a favorable engagement geometry, but enough to add a layer of difficulty that the IRGCN's planners have calculated into their targeting doctrine with the confidence of people who have studied American naval defensive architecture carefully and identified the specific scenarios where the margin of difficulty is widest. The targeting cell in the Zagros foothills has been working this specific scenario for 26 days. The scenario is USS Boxer. USS Boxer, LHD-4, a Wasp-class amphibious warfare ship commissioned in 1995, displaces approximately 40,500 tons at full load, is 843 feet long, has a flight deck covering nearly the entire length of the ship, and presents a radar cross-section that a targeting system designed for aircraft carriers could, in principle, accept as a satisfactory alternative. The IRGCN planners are aware that USS Boxer is not an aircraft carrier. They are also aware that USS Boxer is the largest American surface combatant currently operating in the Persian Gulf, that she is visible from commercial satellite imagery in her anchorage position northeast of Bahrain, and that her flight deck operations schedule, observable from the same satellite imagery by the frequency and pattern of helicopter movements, has been producing a predictable window between 9:30 and 11 o'clock local time when the flight deck is in active operations and the ship is constrained to a relatively steady course and speed to manage the aviation cycle. The targeting cell has built their launch window around this observation. At 9:41, when the morning flight cycle is well underway and USS Boxer is making 8 knots on a steady heading, the launcher in the Zagros foothills fires. Aboard USS Boxer, the flight deck is busy in the way that amphibious warfare ship flight decks are busy during active operations, controlled, professional, and operating at the specific intensity that moving large helicopters and tilt-rotor aircraft around a deck at sea requires. 3 MV-22B Ospreys are in various stages of the launch cycle. The air boss is in his station. The landing signal officers are at their platform. The flight deck crew in their color-coded jerseys are doing what flight deck crews do, which is to say they are doing their jobs with an attentiveness that the environment demands and that has been trained into them by the specific culture of naval aviation, which does not forgive inattention. The operating area is the central Persian Gulf, approximately 60 nautical miles northeast of Bahrain. The Gulf at 9:41 on a Wednesday morning is hot and hazy in the specific way that the Gulf is always hot and hazy, and the flight deck wind is from the southwest at 12 knots, and everything on the flight deck is proceeding as briefed. The USS Monsoon, DDG-91, an Arleigh Burke Flight 2, a destroyer assigned to USS Boxer's amphibious ready group screen, is operating 11 nautical miles to the northwest of the amphibious ship, positioned to provide the Aegis coverage geometry that the ARG defensive architecture requires. The Aegis combat system aboard USS Monsoon has been in its standard air search configuration since the watch began, the SPY-1D scanning the sky above the Gulf in its continuous methodical rotation. The tactical action officer is in the Combat Information Center. The watch team is maintaining the surface and air picture. The coffee situation is, by the standards of the Gulf at 9:41 in the middle of a deployment, acceptable. At 9:41:33, the DSP satellite constellation returns a launch detection from the Zagros foothills. The infrared signature is characteristic of a solid fuel ballistic motor igniting, a brief, intense bloom that the system classifies in under 3 seconds. The warning transmits to the theater BMD network simultaneously and arrives at USS Monsoon's Aegis BMD processor at 09:41:39, 6 seconds after the launch event. The SPY-1D, optimized for the Gulf threat axis as part of USS Monsoon's standing BMD patrol configuration, acquires the rising track at 09:41:44, 5 seconds after the satellite warning. The track is rising from the northeast. The trajectory model initializes. The Aegis combat system begins calculating engagement solutions in the same moment that the track appears on the Tactical Action Officer's display. The Tactical Action Officer has been in his chair for 3 hours and 23 minutes. He has been drinking the same variety of morning coffee and doing the same variety of watch tasks that the midpoint of a morning watch in the Persian Gulf requires. At 9:41:44, his console shows a ballistic track initiating. He is on the internal comms before the track designation finishes populating. Bridge combat. Ballistic launch detection, northeast bearing, track rising, Khalij Fars classification, engage criteria, check, initiating. He keys the BMD authorization circuit simultaneously. The commanding officer is on the circuit within 4 seconds. The Tactical Action Officer does not wait for pleasantries. Single ballistic track bearing 047, rising classified Khalij Fars. Projected impact solution initializing. Request weapons free. The commanding officer reviews the track on his repeater display. He reviews the preliminary trajectory model. He reviews the engagement geometry. He authorizes weapons free at 9:42 and 1 second. 22 seconds from track detection to weapons-free authorization. The SM-2 Block 3B and SM-6 missiles in USS Monsoon's vertical launch cells are available for the terminal defense layer, but the geometry for the mid-course layer, the higher altitude, earlier intercept, that gives the most favorable probability of success against a maneuvering re-entry vehicle, calls for the SM-3 Block 1A that USS Monsoon carries specifically for this mission profile. The engagement solution is calculated. The engagement solution is good. The first SM-3 leaves the forward vertical launch cell at 09:42:08. Here is the vulnerability window, and it requires explanation, not of the hardware, but of the geometry and the specific question that the SM-3's engagement solution cannot answer in the next 90 seconds. The Khalij Fars' maneuvering re-entry vehicle capability is the variable that the targeting cell in the Zagros spent 26 days building their confidence around. The engagement solution the Aegis system has calculated is based on the missile's observed ballistic trajectory. The arc it is flying before the re-entry vehicle separates and initiates its terminal guidance. The ballistic trajectory tells the system where the missile is going if it does not maneuver. The maneuvering re-entry vehicle is designed to deviate from this trajectory in the terminal phase, introducing a lateral offset that can, in theory, move the impact point by several hundred meters from the ballistic trajectory's projected endpoint. In practice, the magnitude of this offset depends on the specific MRV design, the remaining propellant in the maneuvering system, and the quality of the terminal guidance data available to the re-entry vehicle when it initiates its maneuver. The engagement geometry for the SM-3 is calculated for the ballistic trajectory. If the MRV maneuvers, the SM-3's intercept solution needs to be updated. The system can update it. The system is designed to update it. The question that cannot be answered until the re-entry vehicle enters the observable portion of its terminal phase, approximately 90 seconds before impact, at an altitude where the SPY-1D's tracking qualities on a small, fast maneuvering object improve sufficiently to measure the lateral deviation, is how large the maneuver will be and in which direction it will go. For those 90 seconds, the engagement solution is operating on the best available prediction rather than a confirmed track. The prediction is good. The system was designed by people who understood MRV maneuvering. But it is a prediction, and predictions have variance. And the variance in an MRV intercept geometry at the terminal phase is the 90-second window during which the watch team in USS Monsoon's CIC is paying the most intense attention of their deployment to a display that is telling them almost everything they need to know and reserving one variable for the terminal phase. This is the vulnerability window, not a failure of the hardware, a property of the physics. 90 seconds of genuine uncertainty about where exactly the warhead is going, and therefore whether the intercept solution the SM-3 is flying will be accurate enough when it matters. At 9:42:08, the SM-3 is in the air. It is climbing. It is fast. The SM-3 Block 1A accelerates to approximately Mach 3 in the boost phase and cruises at Mach 10 in the mid-course, which means the interceptor is traveling at speeds that make the Khalij Fars' Mach 8 terminal velocity feel comparatively leisurely. The SM-3 has a kinetic warhead, meaning it intercepts by direct physical collision rather than proximity detonation, which requires the targeting system's accuracy to be sufficient for a direct hit on an object the size of a refrigerator, moving at 8 times the speed of sound at an altitude where the atmosphere is thin enough to make aerodynamic maneuvering challenging. This is not a simple problem. The fact that the United States has solved it well enough to deploy it as an operational system is an engineering achievement that deserves acknowledgement before the humor section begins. The humor section begins now. The targeting cell in the Zagros foothills has spent 26 days building a targeting solution for USS Boxer. They have calculated the approach geometry, the terminal guidance activation altitude, and the expected acquisition range. They have run the scenarios. They have reviewed the test data. They have, in the specific way that people who have invested 26 days in a planning problem tend to do, become confident in their solution. What the targeting cell has not fully accounted for, what the 26 days of planning and the commercial satellite imagery and the flight deck observation schedule did not reveal, is that the amphibious warfare ship, making 8 knots on a steady heading in the central Persian Gulf at 0941, is 11 nautical miles from a destroyer, carrying a system specifically designed to intercept exactly this type of weapon, crewed by a watch team that has been in the BMD posture for the entirety of this deployment, with an engagement solution that was calculated and transmitted to the SM-3's guidance system before the targeting cell's warhead had completed 30 seconds of its flight. The Khalij Fars was designed to threaten carriers. USS Boxer is not a carrier. She is an amphibious warfare ship with a flight deck and displaces a meaningful fraction of what a carrier displaces and is, by the Khalij Fars' targeting parameters, a sufficiently satisfying alternative. The missile does not know the difference. The missile's terminal guidance system will look for a large metallic surface contact with a characteristic magnetic signature. USS Boxer will provide one. The SM-3 Block IA, currently climbing at Mach 10, does not care about the distinction either. It is going to intercept whatever ballistic track the Aegis system has designated, which is a ballistic track currently passing through 180 kilometers altitude on a trajectory toward the Gulf. This is the operational picture. The missile cost approximately $1.5 million to produce by the most generous available estimate of Iranian ballistic missile manufacturing costs. The SM-3 Block YA costs approximately $24 million. This is a ratio that the targeting cell in the Zagros finds reassuring from a cost exchange perspective, and that the engagement outcome will make irrelevant in the most direct possible way. The SLQ-32 electronic warfare suite aboard USS Monsoon has been collecting from the Khalij Fars since the track first provided observable emissions at sufficient range for characterization. The Khalij Fars' terminal guidance system, a combination of electro-optical and radar altimeter sensors in the re-entry vehicle's nose section, activates at a predictable altitude as the MRV begins its terminal phase. The activation produces a brief but characterizable emission. The SLQ-32 has been waiting for it. At 9:44:51, the re-entry vehicle's guidance system activates at an altitude that the threat library entry estimated at 25,000 feet. The observed activation altitude is 23,400 feet. The 1,600-foot discrepancy is a measurement. It goes in the collection record. The activation altitude tells analysts the specific MRV designs, terminal guidance initiation parameters, which affects the engagement geometry calculations for future intercepts and which the existing threat library entry had characterized from test observation data at lower confidence than this operational measurement provides. The activation altitude is in the collection record. It goes to the Theater BMD program office before the intercept event is complete. Re-entry vehicle guidance is active, the tactical action officer reports, monitoring the terminal phase engagement. Activation at 23,400 feet. Track is showing a lateral deviation initiating 080 bearing from ballistic reference. The lateral deviation, the MRV's maneuver beginning, is visible on the SPY-1D's enhanced track. The system is measuring it. The measurement is updating the SM-3's guidance system in real time via the uplink that connects the interceptor to the Aegis fire control system throughout its flight. The SM-3 is adjusting. The adjustment is built into the interceptor's guidance architecture, specifically for this scenario. The system is doing what the system was designed to do. The 90-second uncertainty window is closing as the terminal phase data accumulates. The electronic warfare officer below decks is building a collection record that will eventually run to 28 pages. The Khalij Fars' boost motor emission profile, measured from launch through burnout, is now the highest fidelity direct operational measurement of this specific missile's propulsion system in the Theater BMD program's collection database. The burnout velocity, the boost phase duration, the thrust profile signature, all of it measured at operational range under real conditions, not from standoff collection at the edge of detection range. The terminal guidance activation altitude is logged with the confidence of a direct measurement rather than an estimate. The lateral deviation magnitude, the actual maneuver the MRV executed in the terminal phase, will be calculated from the track data after the intercept and will tell analysts the specific magnitude of the MRV's maneuvering capability under operational conditions. All three measurements are operationally significant. All three fill gaps in the existing Khalij Fars threat library entry. The missile flew 260 kilometers and provided the BMD intelligence community with a complete operational characterization that 26 days of IRGCN planning paid for. At 9:45:44, the SM-3 Block 1A intercepts the Khalij Fars re-entry vehicle at an altitude of approximately 71 miles above the Persian Gulf. The kinetic intercept, the direct collision physics of a Mach 10 interceptor meeting a Mach 8 re-entry vehicle, produces a debris field that the SPY-1D notes as a contact loss on the Khalij Fars track. The system updates. The track is flagged as intercept successful. The debris falls outward from the intercept point on ballistic trajectories that the system models and tracks individually, confirming fragmentation consistent with a successful kinetic engagement. None of the debris trajectories project toward USS Boxer. The amphibious warfare ship is still making 8 knots on a steady heading. The flight deck operations have not paused. The Ospreys are still in the cycle. On the flight deck of USS Boxer, the air boss has been aware of the ballistic launch detection since 09:41:44, because the Link 16 data link distributes the track to every platform in the ARG the moment USS Monsoon's Aegis system acquires it. The air boss is also aware from the same data link that an SM-3 is in the air and that the engagement is proceeding. He has made one decision in response to this information. He has not paused the flight operations cycle. The decision is correct. Pausing the cycle mid-sequence creates hazards on the flight deck that the incoming track, being managed by USS Monsoon's SM-3, does not. He notes the intercept confirmation on his tactical display at 09:45:46. He picks up his coffee. It is still warm from the pot made at 8:45. He takes a sip. He returns his attention to the Osprey that is currently in the final approach sequence for the number 2 spot. The Osprey lands normally. The deck crew sequences the next aircraft. The operation cycle continues. The tactical action officer aboard USS Monsoon is composing the initial engagement report. The report will cover the detection timeline, the engagement authorization sequence, the SM-3 employment, the intercept confirmation, and the collection results. The collection summary will note the 3 primary intelligence products: the boost phase propulsion measurement, the terminal guidance activation altitude, and the MRV lateral deviation magnitude. The engagement report goes to 5th Fleet at 9:52. 5th Fleet has it within minutes of the intercept event. The theater commander receives it. The relevant desks in the intelligence community receive the collection summary within the hour. The 28-page detailed collection report follows at 11:17. It goes to the Missile Defense Agency's Threat Assessment Program, to the Defense Intelligence Agency's Ballistic Missile Division, to Pacific Command and CENTCOM's Theater BMD programs, and via established liaison channels to the Israeli Missile Defense Organization, which operates its own Arrow 3 system against Iranian ballistic missile threats and has a direct operational interest in the MRV lateral deviation measurement, a parameter that the Arrow 3's engagement planning also depends on, and that the Israeli program has been working to characterize at operational confidence for 3 years. The liaison channel delivers the measurement within 6 hours of the intercept event. The Israeli program's acknowledgement arrives at 17:43 and notes that the lateral deviation measurement updates a key parameter in their own engagement envelope calculations. The acknowledgement is brief and professional. It conveys what it needs to convey. Now let us address what Iranian state media said happened, because the IRGCN's information operations approach to failed missile engagements is a specific and instructive genre. The IRGCN did not immediately release a statement. This is itself informative. The Iranian state media apparatus releases statements about its military activities with considerable speed when those activities have produced outcomes it wishes to characterize. When outcomes require more careful characterization, the release timeline extends. The first statement arrived at 14:30 Tehran time, approximately 4 hours and 45 minutes after the intercept event. The statement was from an IRGCN spokesperson who described a successful exercise in which the Naval Force's strategic missile units conducted a test of operational readiness in the northern Persian Gulf. The language was careful. It did not describe the intended target. It did not describe the missile's flight path. It did not describe the fact that the missile was intercepted at an altitude of 71 miles by an SM-3 Block 1A before it reached a position from which it could threaten anything. It described a test. The test was, in the statement's framing, successful. The framing required omitting approximately 99% of what actually happened and focusing on the 1% that was accurate. A Khalij Fars was launched from the Zagros foothills and flew a ballistic trajectory over the Persian Gulf. The second account, from a defense affairs correspondent for IRNA, described the exercise as demonstrating the IRGCN's capability to threaten large American surface combatants operating in the Gulf, and noted that the operation had been planned in response to the American naval presence in Iranian-claimed waters. The capability demonstration claim is, in the technical sense, accurate. The Khalij Fars was launched, it flew, its guidance system activated, its MRV maneuvered. The demonstration that a Khalij Fars MRV performing a lateral deviation maneuver of a characterized magnitude at a characterized altitude can be intercepted by an SM-3 Block YA operating with real-time uplink guidance from an Aegis BMD system before the MRV reaches the altitude at which it threatens. Surface targets did not appear in the IRNA account. This omission is understandable. It does not make the collection data less useful to the 12 organizations that received the 28-page report. The targeting cell in the Zagros foothills received the news that the launch had occurred, per the statement. They did not receive the news about the intercept through official channels with any speed. The commercial satellite imagery that the cell had used to plan the operation does not update in real time. The cell's communication with the IRGCN command authority that authorized the launch is encrypted. What eventually reached the cell, through channels that are not available to public analysis, was a communication indicating that the operation had not produced the intended effect. The cell's 26 days of planning produced on the U.S. Navy's ledger an Intercept at 71 miles altitude, a 28-page collection report, and an Osprey landing on USS Boxer's flight deck without interruption. The flight deck crew do not know any of this. They are doing their jobs. The Ospreys are cycling. The air boss's coffee was warm and is now finished. The deck is clear and properly prepared for the next launch and the next recovery and the next launch after that. The Persian Gulf is hot and hazy and smells of kerosene and salt. The flight operation schedule for the day will be completed on time. 3 hours and 49 nautical miles to the northeast, a debris field that was briefly a Khalij Fars maneuvering re-entry vehicle is settling through the lower atmosphere toward the Gulf surface. The debris will not be recovered. The measurement of where the debris fell relative to where the ballistic trajectory projected it to fall is itself a data point on the MRV's lateral deviation magnitude. The data point goes in the appendix of the 28-page report. Everything confirms everything else. The picture gets more precise with every measurement. Aboard USS Monsoon, the tactical action officer is reviewing his engagement report before transmission. He finds a minor timestamp format error in the SM-3 employment record. He corrects it. He transmits. He picks up his coffee. The coffee is cold. This is the condition of coffee on a Gulf deployment. He makes a note in the watch log to brew a fresh pot at the next available interval. The SM-3 cells need reloading before the next watch. The reload will be coordinated with the supply ship at the next scheduled replenishment. The paperwork for the reload is already being drafted by the weapons officer, who noted the employment at 094208 and began the resupply request at 0946 because this is what weapons officers do when missiles leave the cells. The request will be processed. The cell will be reloaded. The Gulf Watch will continue. The next contact report will be handled the same way this one was handled, with the same professional attention and the same cold coffee and the same 22 seconds from track detection to weapons free that the commanding officer will not put in the official report, but will remember precisely. 22 seconds. Detection to authorization. That number also does not appear in the official report. It appears, like the 11 seconds from the mine story, in the commanding officer's personal log. These are the numbers that training produces and that official records cannot fully capture. They exist in the unofficial record that veteran sailors carry in their professional memory. They are passed on informally through debriefs and discussions and the specific culture of people who have done this work at sea, in the way that the important operational truths are always passed on. The official report says the engagement was successful. The personal log says 22 seconds. Both are true. The second one is the one that matters to the next crew. Bye for now.